Have you ever met someone who could walk into a room and instantly command attention without saying a word? Someone whose presence made people sit up straighter, whose opinions seemed more valuable than others, whose confidence was so magnetic that you found yourself wanting to follow them, even though you couldn't explain why? What if I told you this kind of charismatic influence isn't something people are simply born with, but a skill that can be learned, practiced, and mastered? Today's story follows James Morgan, a seemingly ordinary man who discovered the extraordinary power that comes from understanding human nature and aligning completely with one's purpose. From an invisible teenager to one of the most influential business leaders in the world, his journey reveals the true secrets behind authentic charisma and lasting influence. Before we begin this captivating tale, if you're new to story-driven English, hit that subscribe button and notification bell right now. Every week, we bring you engaging stories designed specifically to improve your English while exploring fascinating concepts like influence, leadership, and personal transformation. Our community of English learners is growing every day, and we'd love for you to join us on this language journey. Now settle in and prepare to be transported into the world of The Aura of Influence, a story that might just change how you see yourself and your own potential to impact others. The Aura of Influence. James Morgan wasn't born special. At least that's what everyone in the small town of Oak Ridge believed. He grew up in a modest house with peeling paint, the son of a librarian and a mechanic who barely made ends meet. As a child, he was quiet and unassuming, often lost in the books his mother brought home. His classmates hardly noticed him, and his teachers described him as pleasant but unremarkable on his report cards. But there was something strange about James that only he knew. When he looked at people, he could see what they wanted most, as if their desires glowed around them like colorful mists. The girl who wanted to be seen, the boy who craved respect, the teacher who longed for recognition. It wasn't magic, just an unusual sensitivity to human nature that he couldn't explain. "James, are you daydreaming again?" his mother would ask, finding him staring out the window instead of doing his homework. "You need to focus on your studies if you want to make something of yourself." But James was focusing, just not on what everyone thought he should. He was studying people, noting how they moved, how they spoke, what made their eyes light up or their voices grow passionate. While other teenagers obsessed over video games and social media, James was learning the unwritten rules of human connection. By the time he graduated high school, something had changed. He wasn't the tallest, the most handsome, or the most athletic, but people started to notice him. When James spoke, his classmates listened. When he suggested something, they agreed. There was a quiet confidence in his movements, a certainty in his voice that made others want to follow where he led. "Have you noticed something different about James?" one classmate asked another. "I can't put my finger on it, but he seems, I don't know, more important somehow." The change continued when James went to college. He wasn't rich like many of his peers, and he worked 2 jobs to pay for his education. But he walked into rooms as if he owned them. In group projects, he naturally became the leader without ever demanding the position. Professors remembered his name even in large lecture halls. Strangers struck up conversations with him on the bus, often sharing personal stories they claimed they'd never told anyone else. "There's just something about you that makes me feel like I can trust you," they would say, looking slightly confused by their own openness. James majored in business and psychology, fascinated by what made people tick and how systems of influence worked. His professors were impressed by his insights, and one even suggested he consider teaching. "You have a rare gift, James," the professor said after class one day. "People don't just listen to you, they want to listen to you. Do you understand how valuable that is?" James nodded, but he wasn't interested in academia. He had bigger plans. After graduation, while his peers scrambled for entry-level positions at established companies, James started his own consulting firm. On paper, it made no sense. He had no connections, minimal capital, and zero business experience. His parents were worried. "Couldn't you just get a normal job first?" his father asked over dinner. "Build up some experience and savings before diving into something so risky?" James smiled and put his hand over his father's. "Trust me, Dad. I know what I'm doing." And somehow he did. Within 6 months, his one-man consulting business had 3 major clients. Within a year, he had a small office and 2 employees. People would meet with him expecting to guide the young entrepreneur, only to leave having agreed to whatever James proposed. Not because he manipulated them, he never lied or pressured, but because when James spoke about his vision, it somehow became their vision too. "I don't sell products or even services, not really," James explained to a confused college friend who asked what exactly his company did. "I sell clarity. I help people see what they truly want and show them the path to get there." His friend laughed. "That sounds like complete nonsense, but you said it so convincingly that I almost want to hire you myself." James just smiled. He knew the power of conviction, of speaking with absolute certainty about one's purpose. He had studied the greatest leaders and influencers in history and recognized they all shared an unwavering belief in their mission that others found irresistible. By his 30th birthday, James had transformed his consulting firm into Morgan Vision, a company that specialized in revitalizing struggling businesses. His approach was unconventional. While other consultants came with spreadsheets and cost-cutting strategies, James focused first on the people. "Your company doesn't have a financial problem or a strategy problem," he told the skeptical CEO of a failing manufacturing plant. "It has an energy problem. Your people have stopped believing in what they're doing. Fix that, and everything else will follow." The CEO, a no-nonsense woman with 30 years of industry experience, had initially dismissed James as a woo-woo consultant, with fancy words but no substance. She'd only agreed to the meeting because her board insisted. But by the end of their conversation, she was nodding enthusiastically, already calling her executive team to implement James's suggestions. 3 months later, the plant's productivity had increased by 30% without a single layoff or major policy change. The CEO became one of James's most vocal advocates. "I don't know how he does it," she told her industry colleagues. "He walks into a room full of demoralized workers, speaks to them for 20 minutes, and suddenly they're working like their lives depend on it. The man could probably convince water to flow uphill." As Morgan Vision grew, so did the whispers about its founder. "I heard he's part of some secret influence society," one rival consultant said dismissively. "My friend said he uses psychological tricks he learned from studying cult leaders," said another. "Someone told me he was trained by former intelligence agents in persuasion techniques," a third gossiped. James heard these rumors and others like them and never bothered to deny any of them. He understood that mystery enhanced influence, and he had no desire to explain the simple truth, that his power came from a deep understanding of human needs and the courage to align himself completely with his purpose. By the time he was 35, James had become something of a legend in business circles. CEOs of Fortune 500 companies waited weeks for a meeting with him. His books on leadership and influence became bestsellers. When he spoke at conferences, rooms were always filled beyond capacity. "What's your secret?" a journalist asked him during a rare interview. "How have you achieved so much so quickly?" James leaned forward, his intense gaze making the journalist unconsciously sit up straighter. "There is no secret, only the willingness to see the world as it truly is, not as others tell you it should be, and the courage to walk your own path with absolute conviction." The journalist left feeling strangely inspired to quit his job and pursue the novel he'd always wanted to write. 2 years later, that novel would become a national bestseller, dedicated to JM, who showed me what was possible. Not everyone was enchanted by James Morgan, of course. Some found his intensity overwhelming, his self-assurance bordering on arrogance. Others were uncomfortable with how easily he seemed to read their thoughts and motivations. A few former employees described working with him as being in the presence of a benevolent dictator. You love being around him, but also feel completely exposed. James was aware of these criticisms, but unbothered by them. He knew that true influence would always generate both devoted followers and determined skeptics. He had studied enough history to recognize that charismatic figures throughout time had always been divisive. One person who remained immune to James's influence was his younger sister, Lucy. 4 years his junior and fiercely independent, she had watched her brother's transformation with a mixture of admiration and concern. "You're becoming a brand more than a person, Jamie," she told him during a rare dinner together. She was the only one who still called him by his childhood nickname. "I'm worried you're starting to believe your own mythology." James considered her words carefully. Lucy had always been his reality check, the one person who saw him clearly without the haze of influence that seemed to affect others. "Maybe you're right," he admitted. "Success can be its own kind of trap. But I'm still me, Luce. I still want the same things." "And what are those things?" she challenged him. "Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're collecting power. And influence like some people collect stamps." James fell silent, genuinely reflecting on her question. What did he want? In the whirlwind of his success, he sometimes lost sight of his original purpose. "I want to help people see their own potential," he finally said. "I want to cut through the noise and fear and self-doubt that keeps most people living small lives. I've found my voice, Luce. I just want to help others find theirs." Lucy studied her brother's face for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Just make sure you're not drowning out other voices with yours. Even the most inspiring melody becomes tyrannical when it's the only one allowed to play." Her words stayed with James long after their dinner, prompting a period of introspection that would ultimately lead to the next evolution of his work. Shortly after turning 40, James shocked the business world by stepping away from the daily operations of Morgan Vision, now a global consulting firm worth millions. Instead, he founded the Morgan Institute, a nonprofit organization dedicated to developing leadership and influence skills in underserved communities. The ability to inspire and influence shouldn't be reserved for those born into privilege or those who instinctively understand the unwritten rules of power, he explained at the launch event. These are skills that can be taught, and they should be accessible to everyone who wants to create positive change. The Institute opened centers in disadvantaged neighborhoods across the country, offering free workshops and mentoring programs for teenagers and young adults. James was often found teaching these workshops himself, showing the same level of engagement with a room full of high school dropouts as he had with boards of multi-million-dollar corporations. "Mr. Morgan doesn't talk down to us," said one 17-year-old participant with a history of trouble with the law. "He makes me feel like I could run a company someday, and the weird thing is, when he says it, I actually believe it." Not everyone was convinced by James's apparent change of direction. Critics suggested it was merely a publicity stunt or an attempt to create a personal legacy. Others questioned whether teaching influence techniques to at-risk youth was responsible. "We're essentially giving manipulation tools to kids who already struggle with authority and boundaries," one psychology professor argued in an op-ed that went viral. Morgan's approach might create more problems than it solves. James invited the professor to visit the institute and speak with the students directly. After spending a day observing the programs, the academic published a retraction of sorts. "What Morgan teaches isn't manipulation, but genuine connection and purpose-finding," she wrote. "I still have reservations about some aspects of his approach, but it's clear that many young people are finding direction and hope through his programs." As the Institute grew, James began spending more time writing and developing new curricula. His third book, The Authentic Influencer, became required reading in business schools and leadership programs worldwide. Unlike his previous works, which focused on techniques and strategies, this book delved into the ethical responsibilities that came with influence. "True influence isn't about getting people to do what you want," he wrote in the opening chapter. "It's about helping them connect with what they truly want and finding where your visions align. The moment you use your charisma to override someone else's authentic desires, you've crossed the line from influence to manipulation." The book resonated deeply, particularly with young leaders struggling to navigate the complex ethical landscape of modern influence, from social media to corporate leadership. It showed a new depth to James's thinking that surprised even his longtime followers. James's personal life, however, didn't reflect the same success as his professional endeavors. A brief marriage in his early 30s ended amicably but quickly, with his ex-wife citing his all-consuming focus as the primary reason. A few serious relationships followed, but none lasted. James dated occasionally, but seemed more comfortable in front of an audience of hundreds than in the intimate company of one. "The irony isn't lost on me," he admitted to Lucy during one of their now monthly dinners. "I can connect with strangers instantly on a deep level, but sustaining a personal relationship seems beyond my capabilities." Lucy, now a successful psychiatrist with a family of her own, offered her characteristic, blunt assessment. "You're great at influence, Jamie, but real relationships aren't about influence. They're about vulnerability. And that's always been your blind spot." As he approached 50, James faced a health scare that forced another period of reflection. What doctors initially feared might be a malignant tumor turned out to be benign, but the weeks of uncertainty changed something in James. He began to consider his legacy beyond his work and influence. During his recovery, he received thousands of messages from people whose lives he had touched, former students from the Institute, business leaders he had advised, readers of his books. Each shared how his work had changed their trajectory. It was overwhelming and humbling. One message in particular caught his attention. It was from a man named David Chen, who had attended one of James's earliest workshops 15 years earlier. "You probably don't remember me," the message began. "I was the quiet engineering student who asked about using influence for environmental causes. You spent an hour with me after the workshop, helping me clarify my vision. Today, my renewable energy company just received major funding to expand our operations across Southeast Asia. Thousands of rural communities will have clean electricity because you took the time to help an awkward kid believe in his ideas. Thank you for seeing what I couldn't yet see in myself." James did remember David. Not all the details, but the earnest intensity of the young man. He reached out, and they arranged to meet the next time David was in the country. Over coffee, James listened as David explained how that single conversation had changed his approach to his work and life. "The most important thing you taught me wasn't any specific technique," David said. "It was the idea that conviction isn't about forcing your will on the world. It's about aligning so completely with your purpose that others can't help but be drawn to it. That's what I've tried to do with my company." As James listened, he felt a sense of completion he hadn't expected. Here was tangible proof that his work had spawned something meaningful, something that existed entirely independent of his ongoing influence. In the years that followed, James began to deliberately step back from the spotlight. He trained other instructors to lead the Institute's programs and declined most speaking engagements. Instead, he focused on mentoring a small number of individuals who showed exceptional promise and ethical grounding. "I'm not retiring," he explained to concerned board members. "I'm dispersing." The greatest test of true influence isn't how many people follow you while you're leading. It's what continues to grow after you've stepped away. To his surprise, the Institute flourished without his daily involvement. His books continued to sell, his methods continued to be taught, and his influence, far from diminishing, seemed to expand as others carried his ideas to new audiences and applications. On his 60th birthday, James returned to his hometown of Oak Ridge for the first time in decades. The small town had changed little, though his parents' house now belonged to another family, both his mother and father having passed away in recent years. He walked the familiar streets, past his old high school, the library where his mother had worked, the garage where his father had fixed cars. At the local diner, an elderly waitress did a double take as she served his coffee. "James Morgan? Little Jamie from Elm Street? Well, I'll be. I've seen you on television, but I never made the connection. Your parents would be so proud. Always knew you'd make something of yourself." James smiled, remembering how invisible he had felt in this very diner as a teenager. "Did you really know that?" he asked gently. The waitress hesitated, then laughed. "Well, maybe not. You were such a quiet boy. But there was something in your eyes even then, a kind of I don't know what to call it. Like you were seeing things the rest of us missed. After breakfast, James visited the town's small bookstore, pleasantly surprised that it still existed in the age of online shopping. There, on a prominent display, were all four of his books. The young woman behind the counter gasped when she recognized him. "Oh my God, you're James Morgan. Your books changed my life. I'm actually using your methods to save this bookstore. We've become a community hub now, not just a place that sells books. Would you sign some copies?" As James signed books and chatted with the enthusiastic bookseller, he felt the strange sensation of his life coming full circle. From a quiet boy lost in books to an author whose words now reached millions. That evening, he sat on a bench in the town park, watching families enjoy the summer twilight. A young man about 30 sat down beside him, nodding politely before focusing on a book he'd brought. James glanced over and was startled to see it was his own most recent work, Beyond Influence, Creating Lasting Change. "Enjoying the book?" James couldn't help asking. The man looked up, not recognizing him. "Very much. It's making me rethink my entire approach to my team at work. I'm a manager at the factory outside town, first time in a leadership position, and I'm struggling a bit. This is helping." James felt a familiar urge to offer advice, to use his influence to help this young manager. But instead, he just nodded and asked, "What's the most useful idea you've found in it so far?" The man thought for a moment. "The part about authentic purpose, I think. The author says that people can sense when you truly believe in what you're doing versus when you're just going through the motions, and that no technique or strategy can replace that genuine conviction." He laughed self-consciously. "Sorry, that probably sounds cheesy." "Not at all," James said. "I think that's exactly right." They talked for a while longer, the young manager opening up about his challenges at work, his hopes for his team. James mostly listened, occasionally asking a clarifying question or offering a gentle suggestion. Not once did he reveal his identity. As the sun began to set and the man prepared to leave, he extended his hand. "Thanks for listening. I'm Mark, by the way." "James," he replied, shaking Mark's hand. "It was nice talking with you." "Same here," Mark said, then hesitated. "You know, it's funny. I came to the park feeling completely overwhelmed by work, but somehow talking to you has made everything seem more manageable. You must be a good listener." James smiled, just interested in people's stories. After Mark left, James remained on the bench, watching the last families pack up their picnics as darkness fell. He thought about the journey that had brought him here, from the invisible boy studying human nature to the influential man whose ideas had spread across the world. What had his sister called it? His aura of influence. It was still with him, still part of who he was. But he had learned to wield it differently over the years, to use it not just to lead, but to elevate, not just to inspire, but to empower. As stars appeared in the darkening sky, James felt a deep contentment. The quiet boy from Oak Ridge had indeed made something of himself, though not in the way anyone, including himself, might have expected. He had discovered the true purpose of influence, not to shape the world in your image, but to help others find the courage to shape it in theirs. The next morning, before leaving town, James visited the local high school and made an anonymous donation to fund a new program, teaching communication and leadership skills. The only condition was that the program be available to every student, especially those who, like a young James Morgan, might be sitting quietly in the back of the room, watching and learning, waiting for their moment to be heard. Years later, when asked about the secret to his remarkable influence, James would simply say, "True charisma isn't about who you appear to be. It's about helping others discover who they can become. That's the only influence that matters in the end." And somehow, when James Morgan said it, people believed it was true. Key vocabulary, repeated throughout. Influence, the power to affect someone's character, beliefs, or actions. Charisma, a compelling attractiveness that inspires devotion in others. Conviction, a firmly held belief or opinion. Purpose, the reason for which something is done or created or for which something exists. Authentic, genuine and not false or copied vision. The ability to think about or plan the future with imagination or wisdom. Presence, the state or fact of existing, occurring or being present. Insight, the capacity to gain an accurate and deep understanding of someone or something. Alignment, arrangement in a straight line, or in correct or appropriate relative positions. Legacy, something handed down from one generation to the next. Vulnerability, the quality or state of being exposed to the possibility of being attacked or harmed. Connection, a relationship in which a person or thing is linked or associated with something else. Perception, the way in which something is regarded, understood, or interpreted. Transformation, a thorough or dramatic change in form or appearance. Resonance, the quality of being deep, full, and reverberating. Intuition, the ability to understand something immediately without the need for conscious reasoning. Intentional, done on purpose. Deliberate empowerment, the process of becoming stronger and more confident. Magnetism, the ability to attract and charm people. Authority, the power or right to give orders, make decisions, and enforce obedience. Thank you for joining us for The Aura of Influence, a story that shows us how true charisma comes not from manipulation, but from authentic purpose and genuine connection with others. Just like James Morgan discovered, the most powerful form of influence isn't about getting people to do what you want. It's about helping them see their own potential and inspiring them to reach for it. We hope this story not only helped you improve your English skills, but also gave you something meaningful to reflect on about leadership and personal influence in your own life. Did you relate to any particular part of James's journey? Or perhaps you've met someone with that special aura of influence in your own life. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed today's story, please don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps other English learners discover our channel. And if you want to support us even more, please share this video with a friend who's also learning English, or anyone interested in stories about personal growth and leadership. Make sure you're subscribed to Story Driven English and have turned on notifications so you never miss our weekly story uploads. Each week, we bring you a new engaging story filled with useful vocabulary and natural English expressions to help you improve your language skills while enjoying meaningful content. Until next time, Remember James Morgan's wisdom. True charisma isn't about who you appear to be. It's about helping others discover who they can become. See you in our next story adventure.